La 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 la, love is love. La 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 la, love is love. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about me. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about me.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Andrea,
I'm David.
and this is our Southern Nest adventure. We wanted to do a little bit of something different today, like talk about us and our lives, so you get to know us a little bit and our story. And I actually have a haul too, which I want to kind of like touch on. Okay, I bought something from Zara for my Colette, which is the Zara sculpt. So this is actually from Zara. So I got this for her because if you have the Zara sculpt, the smaller sizes will not fit. I'm gonna put, this is so cute, it's got a little pocket here. I think this is kind of like very unisex. I think a boy could wear that too, but Mason is my only boy and he's not gonna fit it. I don't think he's gonna fit into that. And these little leggings.
You wouldn't know the difference anyhow.
Yeah, I know, but I do. I'm important here. And then these in like a little oatmeal color, and then a little knitted hat, little beanie for her, and a dress. And this is kind of corduroy. No, this is like a flannel dress with like little roses. And then these are corduroy pants. And
Corduroy, boy, is that an old throwback.
I know, right? I forgot something. I bought something from Mason too, but now I think I left it upstairs. Well, something for another day. So our little Macy's right here, snuggling away. It's right here. Oh. So he's gonna listen to our little stories. So a lot of people have asked us like how we met, and it's a pretty crazy story.
Long story.
Yeah, long story. It's actually when I was married before, and the marriage resulted in one child, my son, and a divorce.
Who is now 35?
Yeah, he's going to be 36. And when I got divorced, it was a really tough divorce. Very bitter and mean, and there was a custody battle going on. And so I was completely alone here in this country. I had nobody to help. I had no place to live.
Let me interject here. Her first husband was Jewish and she's German. Her being married to a Jewish guy didn't bother her relatives whatsoever. His relatives, on the other hand, did not like this at all. It's like Andrea and her ex-husband started World War III with her ex-husband. So,
which doesn't really
well,
help.
it added to the animosity of your divorce.
Well, plus the fact that the man was completely lazy. He was not a very. I think he had anger management problems, and I think that comes from his childhood. But that's another story. I don't want to hop on that. So anyway, so we got divorced, and I was in the apartment that we lived in, and I wanted to take my son to Europe to just kind of, regroup and be with my family, but I couldn't take my son out of the country without my ex-husband's permission. So I asked him to sign a letter, that I could take him out of the country, and he said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. I'll sign the letter and you sign over the car that we both owned, and sign the pink slip. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I had, back then there was TWA still, the airline TWA. I had the TWA credit card. I booked a ticket. I sublet my apartment to a co-worker that I was working with at the hotel. And I booked a flight. The night before, I put whatever furniture I had, which wasn't much because my ex-husband, while I was at work, went and got a moving truck and moved everything out, but left me a few things. So the night before I was supposed to leave, I get a knock on the door, and it's his sister, and basically serving me papers saying that I couldn't take my son out of the country. So obviously, without my son, I wasn't going to leave the country. So I was basically now stuck. I had no apartment. I had a job, but I had no place for my son to go. He was at the time maybe 11 months. So I was kind of like really stuck. So what happened is I basically gave him to my ex-husband in the middle of the night, drove over there, and he was living with his mother. In a taxi, because I was completely desperate. And I said, okay, you know what, you win. You can have him because I have nothing else. I have no apartment. I have no money. I'm not going to leave the country without my son. And so I left him at the doorstep. And then the big custody battle happened. And just as we were about to go in front of a judge, his attorney pulled me aside and said, well, he doesn't want him. You can have him, and he's not fighting for custody anymore because he's too much work, which was great for me. So, but the problem still existed that I didn't have, a play. I wasn't prepared to stay home and make money. I could either stay home with my son or make money. And I needed to make money in order to pay for rent. I didn't have an apartment. So my brother came out here and picked up my son.
From Germany.
Yeah, he flew out here from Germany, picked up my son, and so I could, get my life together. My son was over there for 2.5 months, and in this 2.5 months I worked. I stayed with friends, so I didn't have to pay rent. I stayed with friends. I saved my money, and I found an apartment in Hollywood on Poinsettia, very close to the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel.
Between Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset Boulevard, right off Highland.
So that's where I found an apartment which was close to work because I wasn't driving. So I needed something that was close to work, close to my son's preschool. I found a really good preschool, which is still there. It's been there for like
Hollywood Little Red
Schoolhouse. Yeah, on Highland Avenue. It's still there. So everything had to be within walking distance for me, or take a bus. So that was perfect, but the rent was $700 a month.
$750.
Yeah, which was back in the 80s, a lot of money. But it had everything I needed. I wanted a pool because I knew I couldn't afford to go on vacation. It had security because I was a single woman. It was close to my job, and it was close to a grocery store. So everything that I needed was there. So I called my brother and said, okay, I'm all set. You can come and bring him back. And my brother says, well, why don't I come too? In this way, because hotel business, you work all kinds of shifts, and you work weekends and holidays.
Double shifts.
Right. And preschools are only open until 6 o'clock at night, and they're not open on the weekends. So I said, oh, that would be great. So my brother quit his job. He came out here to help me with my son. And it was my brother, me, and my son that lived in this one-bedroom apartment. My son got the bedroom. I slept in the living room, and my brother slept in Tyler's room, my son's room, on a sleeping bag. And so that worked out really great for us. And so as I'm walking back and forth, with my son in a stroller, getting into the elevator, one day I met David in an elevator. And
No, the first time I met you was you were with your brother, tall, thin guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, totally German.
Right?
You're totally German.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't...
Tyler's got blonde hair, blue eyes.
Mm-hmm. So I didn't really pay much attention to David because I was so... when you're a single mom and you are just working and taking care of your child and trying to make all the pieces fit, you don't don't notice people, you don't notice anything around you. You just kind of like go on, automatic pilot mode. And so I just said, hi, just in the elevator, always hi, how are you, good, how are you, good. Didn't really pay much attention to it. Until one day, my son would go to his father on every other weekend, and there was this one weekend where I was at home, my son was with his dad, and my brother was out running around with friends, and I was all alone. I was just kind of like walking the hallways, and we had a pool and a jacuzzi, and
we were on the third floor looking down.
Right, I was on the third floor, and then I was walking by, wasn't I walking by the...
You walked by my apartment.
Right.
Or me and Frank and Brenda's apartment.
Right, and then how did we get to... did you come out to look at I remember...
You remember it differently than I do. I remember Uncle Mike and Tyler being downstairs in the pool, and I was in cooking dinner, and I had the door open, and there was sliding glass doors or windows overlooking the pool, the jacuzzi area, and the patio, and I could hear you out there yelling at them. And so I walked out with a dish towel over my shoulder.
Maybe that's what happened. No.
You thought I was gay because I was always home.
Hey, that's like.
Okay, but anyhow, you and I started talking. I says, "Oh, your husband is."
No, that's not.
That's exactly how I remember it. I asked you if your husband was teaching Tyler how to swim. I knew that's not my husband. That's my brother. Oh boy, did that change my attention real quick. Oh, I thought that was your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we ended up having a glass of wine.
I invited you upstairs. Let me, this is not my story.
Okay, well, I don't know if we remember it the same way. This is 33 years ago.
So I remember standing by the window, and maybe it was my brother. I don't remember that. But probably it could have been, I don't know.
That's how I remember it.
But anyway, so I said, so I'm looking at this guy, and he's like, oh, they're talking to me, and I'm like, oh, well, he seems nice enough, and I was kind of like bored, and I've always seen him in the apartment, the same apartment, cooking, and there was always a guy there, and it was like, and we lived in Hollywood, and it was like, there were a lot of, gay people.
You got a whole mixture in Hollywood of everybody you can imagine.
And I said, I'm thinking to myself, well, the guy's gay, because he's always cooking, and there's always a guy there, and, always has a towel over his shoulder, and I'm like, oh, well, you know what? He's going to be fine to talk to. Let's invite him for wine. So I'm like, okay, are you free? Do you want to come up for a glass of wine? David's like, sure. So he comes upstairs, and we have a glass of wine, and I ask him about, himself, and he's like, talked about Alaska, that he just moved from Alaska, and we talked about marriages, and he's like, yeah, I'm divorced, and I have 2 boys. And I'm like, huh? I'm like, what? You are divorced? You've been married? You have kids? And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God,
I had been married for 12 years.
Yeah. So
I got engaged in high school.
So I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, why are you so surprised? And I said, I thought you were gay. I thought you were gay. And I'm like, and then I said to David, I'm like, well, why did you never approach me or whatever? Because he's like, I've always saw you in the elevator. You look so pretty, and you were you seemed so together with your son, and you always seen you, with Uncle Mike. We called him Uncle Mike, and he's like, I always thought you guys were married. I always thought that you were married together, and I'm like, no, that's my brother, and he's here to help me. So
What's that?
Yeah. So that's kind of like where we kind of like connected, and then we started dating, and I wasn't really.
That night was our first date.
Was it that night?
Yep. That's when we walked down Sunset Boulevard and went to my favorite Italian bar restaurant called Genos or Genios.
Yeah, genius.
Totally mafioso, but that's
Okay.
where I'd been hanging out. So we walked down Sunset Boulevard at 5 or 6 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Went to our first date.
So anyway, yeah, that's what happened, and then I was kind of like not really in the market for dating and or being involved with anybody. So Dave was really sweet. He always would pick me up from the hotel and called me, and we went out with my brother and his friends, and David was the only one with a car. So at one point I said, I don't really want to be in a really serious relationship. I'm really kind of like pulling back, and then one day my brother comes to me and says, hey, you know what, you need to be a little bit more serious with David, because David is getting a little irritated because he's not the kind of person that just kind of like just dates, and he wants to have a relationship. I'm like, well, I'm not in it for a relationship. And my brother says, hey, you need to stick close to him because he's the only one with a car, because otherwise we can't get anywhere. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, just be friends with him. Just be friends with him. And I'm like, okay, I'll stay friends with him. So nothing really happened. We didn't do anything for a long time.
Oh, you didn't want anything to do with me.
No.
I just wouldn't go away.
No.
I was infatuated with you
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah, and then
I'd been in the woods in Alaska for 3 years by myself. Now, granted, I was in
engaged,
L.A.
and you were
Okay,
engaged
I was
over there.
engaged, and she left me because of cocaine. Not me, her. But
Not me, her.
no, not you. The woman I took to Alaska with me. It was just, Andrea didn't really, like she said, she wasn't looking for a relationship. It just wasn't the right time for her. Her brother and I were really good friends, and he didn't speak very good English at that time, but after being around him for so long, he and I became very good friends, and I learned to understand the German accent mixed with English, and anyhow, he and I became very good friends, and basically that's how Andre and I got tied up. Was Mike is really the one that
Got us really together.
but Andre didn't want anything to do with me. She
Well, and then-
shoved me off and shoved me off and shoved me off.
But the more I realized, what a nice guy he was, how considerate, and how he would, he had a full-time job, and he had to get up in the morning to go to work, and he would still stay up till 11 o'clock to pick me up, and by the time we
2
went
o'clock sometimes.
well, 2 o'clock is when we kind of like went to bed or went to sleep or whatever, because by the time we started talking and had a glass of wine and talked about our lives and blah blah blah, we didn't kiss or do anything for a while, and so we didn't.
It was a slow process.
Yeah, very slow process. And then finally, I said, you know what? He's got everything that I really want in somebody, and if I'm going to, if I need to move along and speed it up, in order for him not to think that I'm just, like dragging him along for the car.
She's not telling the whole story, people, believe me.
So, why?
Never mind.
So, I'm not lying. Not that I remember. But anyway,
I
so
don't
what
know if you-
happened?
okay,
But
go
anyway,
ahead.
so what happened then is, so we started dating seriously, and once we started dating seriously, I used to hang out at David's place at night because Mike was home with Tyler, and I didn't want to wake them up, so we started hanging out in David's place in his room. and
Spending
his-
the night together.
Right, yeah, exactly. And then, well, at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning, I would have to get up because Dave had to go to work and I couldn't stay in the place by myself. And it created a lot of friction with his best
Lifelong
friend's.
friend and his new wife.
Right, and because the friend was married, which I didn't know, I never saw the wife, I always just saw him. And at one point, I had really had enough of this woman, and I went to the pool where she was, and I said, what is your problem with me staying there? I'm an adult, and I'm not stealing your stuff. Why do I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning? And she's like, well, because it's my place. And I said, well, you know what? David's not living with you anymore. He's living with us. And David's like, what? Yeah, it like completely blindsided him. And so we went
At the time, I had to work Monday through Friday, 7 to 5, and then my boss required me to work half a day on Saturday. So I have to be, and this is down in the Pico neighborhood, on Pico Boulevard. So I had to drive all the way down there, be there by 7 o'clock, and I had to work till noon on Saturday. I come home, 12:30? And
You're moving.
Andrea and her brother meet me at the door downstairs. What's this? You don't normally meet me. And they says, oh, you're not living with Frank and Brenda anymore.
You're living with us.
Me and Mike went to the managers and we found another apartment that the four of us can live in. Well, really? I didn't have any say-so in this.
And we
Just
rented,
all of a sudden, I'm moving into a new, and you and Mike had already moved my furniture.
we got a 1.5 bedroom. Like it was like a 1 bedroom and like a den or something like that.
With
and
a
then,
curtain, like
right.
in a doctor's
and
office.
Mike,
or
right,
something.
because we didn't want to spend so much on rent. And so Mike took the den, and me and David and Tyler slept in the bedroom. And so that went on for like a couple of months. And then we decided we needed like more space, and the penthouse came available. So my girlfriend, who is from South Carolina or North Carolina, in some of the Carolinas, she worked in a hotel too, and she was looking for a place. And I said, well, why don't you move in with us? And so because we wanted to save money, because we wanted to buy a house eventually, so we didn't want to pay a lot of money in rent. David is completely against paying rent anywhere for
At
anything.
the time, the rent for the penthouse in Hollywood
was
$1,100 a month.
$1,100.
And that was in 1987, late 87, early 88.
Right. So we had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath penthouse with a rooftop terrace.
Which was all fenced in
for Tyler.
AstroTurf,
Right, and then we put that bamboo stuff all around to get
so
private.
Tyler wouldn't go out.
Right, and plus also for privacy. So we put our barbecue out there, and we had chairs out there, and we sunbathed out there, and Tyler rode his little tricycle out there.
And
then
we're in downtown Hollywood.
it was great.
Oh.
Anyway, it was myself. So it was David, myself, Tyler, Mike, Eric, Tyler's best friend Eric, who was from Switzerland.
Who's
from Switzerland, and who
No.
he was from Switzerland. He
He
from
was
Switzerland.
Austrian.
Austrian, sorry.
Right.
Austrian was a house man or something for like some rich guy in Beverly Hills.
German industrialist that lived right next door to Hugh Hefner's mansion, and when you go up on the second floor, you overlooked Hugh Hefner's whole backyard.
Yep.
And remember that guy made Eric leave
on the weekends.
Right.
Yep.
And that's why he came and stayed with us, because he had no other place
to go.
He slept on the floor next to Mike on a sleeping bag.
Right, but he paid rent.
Yep.
We are like, yep. And Teresa, my
Slept
girlfriend,
on the couch in the living room.
Yep, slept on. We are like, rent everybody rent. So it made our rent like $250 each. So we lived there for
A year and a half.
year and a half.
Well, maybe a year. I think 1 year at least.
During that time that we lived there, we made a lot of good friends, and those friends later on in the story, when we continue, they will play a big part in our story as
Our
we continue
transition from Hollywood over the Hollywood Hills into Burbank.
Right. So we met like 2 really good
3.
friends. Well,
2 of them
two.
moved with us.
Right. So it was Pam and Paul. Pam was white. Paul was black.
Debbie and
Jim.
Yep.
They were from Oregon, so they really
My neck of the
right.
woods.
So they got really close friends with David, and therefore close friends with me, and
You're getting ahead of yourself a little bit.
so I know, but we can't discuss everything.
We left Hollywood, went into Burbank, rented an apartment. The people that Andrea's talking about came over and this was a brand new apartment house. Nobody had ever lived there before. So those 2 couples moved over and we stayed there for a while. Then we went and rented a house.
Okay, so the reason why we moved out of Hollywood was because my friend Erica Nunn, who's German, who I lived with while I was going through this divorce situation when Tyler was in Germany, she is a property manager, and I was in touch with her, off and on, and she was working for Vidal Sassoon too. And she called me one day and she says, hey, I'm managing a new apartment building. It's brand new. It's in Burbank. I'm like, where's Burbank? She's like, it's right over the hill from Hollywood. And I'm like, oh. And she's like, yeah. She's like, I would, you want to get out of Hollywood because you want to, I wanted my son to get out of Hollywood, because the education, the Los Angeles school district is not really very great for school.
The other thing that we found out when we got together, and Tyler was 2.5, 3 years old,
right.
We found out very quickly that Hollywood is not very conducive to family life.
Right.
We had to get out of Hollywood.
Right. So she said, if you want, come take a look. And I'm like, what's the rent like? And she said, $900. And I'm like, ooh, $900. Geez, $900. That's really a lot of money. And so anyway, so we took a look. And at that point, I was making pretty decent money. Dave was making pretty decent money. And we just had Tyler. We didn't have any other children. So we took a look. It was a great apartment. Great. Brand new. And so we told Pam and Paul and Jim and Debbie. And they took a look. And
After we moved in.
Right. And they moved subsequently in there too, because there were only, how many units were in there? 6?
8, or I think there was 4 upstairs and 4 downstairs.
Erica was living in one, and there was
she was a downstairs.
Then there was this black couple from Nigeria or Africa or something.
The wannabe actor, and
Yeah.
he went to Africa to marry a real African woman.
Right. So they lived downstairs too, and then there was us, then Pam and Paul, and Jim and Debbie.
Jim and Debbie.
Right. So we all knew each other. So it was great. It was like
we controlled the apartment house.
Yeah, we have it completely great. So we lived there for, 2 years. And during that time, I was working for a real estate agency, and I found, and I always knew that David wanted to actually own a house. And I said, well, I really was not into owning a house at all.
We didn't have enough money at the time anyhow
Right.
to buy one.
Right. So I said, so the Burbank Board of Realtors had a property that they owned, and it just became vacant. It was a house right down the street. So we took a look, and we liked it, and it was $900 because we agreed to do the lawn, to mow the lawn, and to keep the property, maintained. But it was right by an alley. But we didn't care. It was a house. It was small. It was like, 900 square feet?
2 bedrooms, 1 bath.
Yep.
Little dining room, little kid. Well, the best thing was nice living room with a big fireplace.
Yeah, huge fireplace.
I will not look at a house without a fireplace.
Right. And then so my son basically learned how to ride a bike in that neighborhood. We made lots of friends that we have now in that same neighborhood. We became really rooted in Burbank at that point. And then after we have been in that house for 2 or 3 years, we decided, you know what, we want to stay here. This is a perfect place for us to be. The next house that comes available, let's go take a look. And because I was still working for the real estate agency, so one of the realtors, Kevin Roberts.
Montaloni and Associates.
Yeah, Kevin Roberts and his wife Valda, I remember her. English from England. So he showed me the house. He's like, okay, this is going to be the perfect house for you. So we looked, we liked, we moved, perfect. Then when this house that we bought finally came up, he thought about me and he says, look, there's an issue with the house. And he's like, the issue is that they never put it on the MLS listing. So there's been no traffic in this house. And the woman is Japanese. And her husband is already back in Japan, and she's stuck there with a baby.
He got recalled.
Yeah, back to Japan by his company. And she got stuck there having to sell this house, and she got no traffic through the house. And she didn't understand why. Well, we weren't going to tell her why, why, and what did they want? They wanted like $235 for the house at the time.
Started at $265. They couldn't sell it. They lowered it to $235.
And then we came up and we were like, okay, well, we'll offer you $190 because Kevin said, don't go to $200 because they're going to counter offer, and then you're not going to, because we wanted to stay within the $200 range because we needed to come up with, we only had $40,000.
At that point, it was mandatory 20% down.
Mm-hmm.
So 20% of the $200,000 house is $40,000. That's
Right.
a lot of money.
So but we loved this house. I mean, we looked after this house. We looked in North Hollywood and Van Nuys, and we just couldn't. We didn't like any of the houses. We didn't like the neighborhood. We didn't like the houses.
We kept gravitating back
to that house, the first house we ever saw. And so we offered $190, and the woman kind of like said back and forth, hemming and hawing. And then she said, okay, I'll kind of offer $200. And we said, okay, we'll take the $200 if you will leave the washer and a dryer and an armoire and a dresser that we still have to this day, because we knew she couldn't take it with her to Japan anyway. So she's like, okay. And so that's how we got our first house in Burbank in 1990. 92, because Haley was born in 92, because we said the whole time, if we get this house, then we are not going to try having kids, because we were trying to have kids and it didn't work. And we're like, okay, this is going to be an omen for us. If we get the house, we're going to stop, because the house was just big enough for 3 people, And then once we moved in April, we moved in April, and by May I found out I was pregnant. And I was like, so the house was already too small when we moved in, but we made it work. It was 1,007 square feet.
Right. Our address was 1,006, and the square footage was 1 foot bigger than our address.
Yep. And
3 little bedrooms and 1 bath.
Yep. And we lived in that house with 1,007 square feet for how many years? 15 years?
Longer than that.
Because we couldn't add on.
We lived on that house for 26 years, and we added on to the house in what?
When the kids were like 10 and 12.
So that would have been 2001 or 2?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there, where we decided to add on to the house.
Yeah, because we wanted to add on before that when we first found out, but the real estate market took a complete dive. A year after we moved in, we lost all of our equity. The house all of a sudden was only worth $160,000. I'm like, what?
157 is what it was worth on paper. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So we had no equity. So we had to wait, and it took 10 years to get enough equity back into the house for us to. And at one point we had David's youngest son living with us, Tyler. Then I had another child, so we had 4 kids living with one bathroom. Yeah, let me tell you, it was interesting. It was fun though.
Funny how you can make do with what you're faced with. The kids needed us. That's all. We already had each other, but the children needed us really bad. They needed
a home, a family,
substantial home,
right? And
loving, caring.
And I think how you make it work in California is you don't need a lot of square footage, because the weather is so nice that we had a huge deck, a huge backyard. The kids were outside all the time. I mean, they were like 9 o'clock in the morning. They were out. They were outside. I mean, our
backyard,
our
on the street.
backyard looked like Toys R Us. I mean, they had one of those castles. They had 2 swing sets. They had sandboxes. They had a pool. It was crazy. They were never inside the house.
We had a very big backyard for California, and we turned it into a small Disneyland. And all the kids in the neighborhood. I mean, we had Girl Scout campouts in that backyard. Remember how many barbecues did we have with Girl Scouts? I'd be barbecuing so many hamburgers, I'd have grease all over my glass. I couldn't see what I was doing.
Yeah, every party, every holiday, everybody always came to our house.
Yep.
And our house at the end was getting so small, because you think, like once the kids are not kids anymore, they're not babies anymore, you get rid of all the toys, then they become teenagers, but then they want their own space. and all of a sudden they have spouses, and your family doesn't get smaller, your family gets bigger. And if you would have stayed in that house, we would have had to knock some stuff down and maybe, like make that office like part of the kitchen. That was really
No
our
dining room.
yeah, part of that dining room, right? And make that, because it was getting, nobody wanted to be
We didn't have enough room to put everybody at the table.
and nobody wanted to do it in their house. They're like, no, they all wanted David's cooking. They all wanted to be in Burbank. They all wanted to be in our backyard, on our deck, and with our family. And it was like every holiday was spent with at least
Oh,
8, 10
Thanksgiving, Christmas,
people,
Easter,
12 people.
birthdays.
And it's not even our immediate family. Our immediate family is mine is in Germany and David's is in the Pacific Northwest. But my brother came out quite a lot. My brother was here for months at a time.
Every winter.
Yep. So that was good though. We loved having him around. That was really fun. So that's how we met. So the next story is going to be our story about our buddy Lillian Nelson, who was the cook, the chef for the Reagans.
Well, no, started out with the
Yeah,
Milners.
right, I know, but she ended up as the cook, and that's like a really long story. So we're gonna go there and tell you a little bit of some stories that happened in Hollywood, as we call it, while we were living there, and one of the reasons why we actually moved out of there, what happened in the apartment buildings. It was like pretty crazy. So we're gonna bring that up some
Which
other
one?
time.
There's two
Yeah.
or three things.
Yeah, I know. So we're gonna bring that up the next time. But for now, we leave it here. I have an upload on Instagram where I changed Alessia. So if you want to hop on over there. And this little guy is going to go back into his bassinet here. And look at him. Oh.
He's just listening at all, not paying any attention to us.
So cute. He reminds me so much of my son. So I have one that looks like my son, one looks like my daughter, and the next one's going to look like my other one, and then that's it for me. I got my 3 kids. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope we didn't bore you to tears, but there's more stuff to come. More interesting and more like outrageous stuff.
If you're interested
Yeah.
in it, everybody's got a story.
Right,
Everybody's got multiple stories. But
But
if you're interested in what we have to say,
Yeah, give it a thumbs up, give us a comment. If you'd like to hear more about the 2 or 3 outrageous stories that happened to us in Hollywood before we moved, or what actually made us move and realize that this is not a good place to raise a child, let us know, and we'll go there next. And then also the story of Lillian Nelson, who is like my godmother. And then anyway, so let me tell us what you want to hear, and until then, be kind to one another. I don't even know where the thing is here, the camera. Do you know where the camera is in here? Because you always look in there right, and I don't.
I don't know, I just try to put my head in where they can,
Yeah.
so I'm not sitting like this. I'm not a
Anyway.
professional here.
I'm not either. Anyway, thank you so much. Be kind to one another and let your love multiply. Talk to you later. Bye. You wanna
Happy
click-
trails to everybody.
You wanna
See
click-
you again.
You want to click that button there? Thank you. Bye.
Sous le ciel